The HOA president stood in the middle of the dirt road screaming at me. "You can't close this road. Our entire neighborhood uses it." I calmly locked the gate. "Yes, but there's one problem." She crossed her arms. "What problem?" "This road belongs to my property." Her face went pale. Because the road their entire HOA had been using for over 20 years was now sitting behind my locked gate. 6 months ago, I bought a small lake cabin outside the city. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place surrounded by trees, a small dock, and a gravel road leading down to the water. The best part? The property was not part of any HOA. After years of dealing with HOA rules in my old neighborhood, that alone made the place worth buying. Or at least, that's what I thought. A few weeks after moving in, I noticed something strange. Cars. Lots of cars. Driving past my cabin. SUVs. Golf carts. Even delivery trucks. At first I thought maybe the road connected to another neighborhood. But after checking the property map, I realized something surprising. The entire road was on my land. About half a mile up the road was a large lakefront HOA neighborhood. Nice houses, private docks, fancy boats. Apparently, the previous owner of my land had allowed the HOA to use the road for decades. Just a friendly agreement, no paperwork, no easement, nothing official, which meant something very important. Legally, the road belonged to me. At first, I didn't mind, but the traffic got worse. Way worse. Early mornings, late nights, speeding cars, loud boats being hauled down the road. One afternoon, a delivery truck actually blocked my driveway while trying to turn around. That's when I decided to talk to the HOA. I went up to the HOA office the next day. The HOA president was a woman named Linda, mid-50s, perfect hair, permanent scowl, and a tone of voice that made it clear she enjoyed being in charge. I explained politely. "Hi, I'm the new owner of the lake cabin down the road." She nodded impatiently. "Yes?" "I just wanted to talk about the traffic using the road." Her expression instantly changed. "Oh, that road?" "Yes. That's our neighborhood access road." I blinked. "Well, technically it's on my property." She laughed, actually laughed. Linda leaned back in her chair. "That road has been used by our residents for 20 years. I understand that, but so it's basically ours." I stared at her. "That's not really how property works." Her smile disappeared. "Well, you can't stop us from using it." I tried to stay calm. "I'm not trying to stop anyone. I just want to reduce the traffic and maybe put up a speed sign." She leaned forward. "No." Just one word. No discussion, no compromise. Just no. As I stood up to leave, Linda added one more thing. "If you try to block that road, we'll take legal action." I almost laughed, because at that point, I had already checked the property records 3 times, and legally speaking, the road belonged 100% to my land. 2 weeks later, a truck arrived at my cabin. Not a moving truck, a fence installation truck. They installed a simple wooden fence across the road, and right in the middle, a large metal gate with a lock. It took about 3 hours for the HOA to notice. By afternoon, a convoy of angry homeowners showed up at the gate, and right at the front was Linda, the HOA president, standing in the road, looking furious. "You cannot do this." I calmly held up the property survey. "Yes, I can." When the HOA residents arrived at the gate, they looked confused at first. Most of them had probably driven that road for years without ever thinking about who owned it. But now there was a large metal gate, a wooden fence, and a bright sign that read, "Private property, no unauthorized access." At the front of the group stood Linda, the HOA president. Her face was red with anger. "You need to open this gate immediately." I stayed calm. "No." Linda stepped closer. "This road is the only way our residents reach the lake docks." I nodded. "I know. And you can't just block it?" I pulled out the folded property survey from my pocket. "Yes, actually I can." I handed it to her. She glanced at it for about 2 seconds before shoving it back toward me. That doesn't matter. But it did matter. The survey clearly showed the road running directly through my land. There was no public easement, no HOA access agreement, nothing. Just a dirt road the previous owner had allowed people to use out of kindness. And that kindness had turned into entitlement over the years. Some of the other homeowners started whispering among themselves, "Wait, is this really his property? I thought the HOA owned that road." Linda immediately shut that down. "Of course we do." I calmly pointed toward the survey. "Actually, you don't." Linda pulled out her phone. "Fine. If you won't open the gate, we'll let the sheriff deal with this." She dialed right there in the middle of the road. I leaned against the fence and waited, because honestly, I was curious to see how this would play out. About 20 minutes later, a sheriff's SUV pulled up. The deputy stepped out and walked toward the gate. He looked at the group of angry homeowners, then at me. "All right, what's going on here?" Linda rushed forward immediately. "This man blocked our neighborhood access road." She pointed dramatically at the gate. "He's trapping our entire HOA." The deputy looked at the fence, then back at her. "Is this a public road?" Linda hesitated. "Well, it's always been used by our residents." I handed the deputy the same property survey. He studied it carefully, then walked a few steps down the road, checking the boundary markers. After about a minute, he returned and nodded. "Well?" He turned to the HOA group. "This road appears to be on his private property." Linda's jaw dropped. The crowd immediately started talking all at once. "What do you mean? That can't be right. We've used this road forever." The deputy raised a hand. "Using a road doesn't automatically make it public." Then he looked at Linda. "Do you have an easement agreement?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head. The deputy turned back to me. "As long as there's no legal easement, you have the right to control access to your property." Then he looked at the HOA residents. "That includes this road." The entire group fell silent. Linda looked like someone had just unplugged her brain. After a long pause, Linda finally spoke again. "This isn't over." She pointed at me. "The HOA will sue you." I shrugged. "You're welcome to try." The deputy sighed slightly. "All right, folks. Unless there's an actual dispute in court, this is private property." He gestured toward the gate. "He's within his rights." One by one, the HOA residents turned their cars around, muttering, complaining, trying to figure out what to do next, because suddenly, their fancy lakefront neighborhood had a serious problem. The only road to their docks was now behind my locked gate, and the HOA president who threatened me with legal action had just been proven wrong in front of everyone. The moment the sheriff left, reality started sinking in for the HOA residents. Their neighborhood sat on a beautiful lake. Most of them had expensive boats, private docks, jet skis, fishing equipment, and now the only road that reached those docks was locked behind my gate. For the first time, the residents weren't looking angry at me. They were looking at Linda. One of the homeowners stepped forward. "Linda, how did this happen?" Another added, "I thought the HOA owned that road." Linda immediately tried to recover. "Well, it's always been used by the community." But that wasn't the same thing, and everyone standing there knew it, because using something for years doesn't mean you own it. For the next few days, the road stayed closed. The gate remained locked, and the HOA residents quickly discovered how serious the situation really was. Without that road, they had no easy way to reach the lake. The only alternative route required driving almost 8 miles around the forest. For people used to a 2-minute drive to their docks, that was unacceptable. 3 days later, the HOA scheduled an emergency meeting. Apparently, the situation had turned into a full-blown crisis for the neighborhood. Later that afternoon, I received a polite knock on my cabin door. When I opened it, Three HOA board members were standing there. But something was different. Linda wasn't speaking this time. One of the board members introduced himself. "Hi, I'm Robert. I'm on the HOA board." His tone was calm, respectful, very different from Linda's. "We were hoping we could talk about the road situation." I nodded. "Sure." Robert glanced back toward the road and sighed. "We didn't realize the property boundaries were like this." That was the first honest statement I'd heard from the HOA. Robert explained something interesting. The HOA had contacted engineers to see if they could build a new road around my property. The estimate? Nearly $400,000. Between clearing trees, grading land, and laying gravel, the cost was far higher than anyone expected. And suddenly, closing the gate had become a very expensive problem for the HOA. Robert spoke carefully. "We'd like to discuss a possible access agreement." Linda looked like she had swallowed a lemon, but she stayed quiet. I folded my arms. "I was actually open to that from the beginning." Robert nodded slowly. "I understand. And unfortunately, we handled this poorly." That was probably the closest thing to an apology the HOA had ever given anyone. My proposal was simple. I didn't want to stop people from using the road completely. I just wanted control over my property. So I offered 3 conditions. 1. The HOA would sign a legal easement agreement. 2. The road would have a strict speed limit. 3. The HOA would help maintain the road each year. That was it. No crazy demands. Just basic respect for the property. Linda clearly hated the idea, but the other board members understood something important. The alternative was a $400,000 road project. Robert looked at the other board members, then nodded. "I think that's reasonable." For a moment, Linda looked like she might argue, but she stayed silent, because the entire HOA was now watching her decisions. 2 weeks later, the paperwork was finalized. A legal access agreement, signed by the HOA board, filed with the county, and for the first time ever, the road finally had official rules and boundaries. I unlocked the gate that afternoon. Cars started using the road again, but this time, they slowed down when passing the cabin. The biggest change wasn't the road, it was the HOA itself. Linda lost a lot of influence after the incident. Residents realized she had nearly caused a $500,000 disaster by refusing to listen. And from that point on, the HOA became a lot more careful about assuming they owned things. As for me, my lake cabin became exactly what I wanted it to be: quiet, peaceful, surrounded by trees and water. And every time someone drove past my property, they passed a small wooden sign near the gate. It read, "Private Road. Access by agreement." A reminder that sometimes all it takes to stop HOA entitlement is one locked gate and a property survey.